My name is Gunter Dreyers. I'm Associate Professor of Translation Studies at Ventspils University of Applied Sciences, and I have been nominated here as a moderator, so I will try to keep the time and invite the speakers. So, okay, to cut the long story short, I would like to invite Daria Protopopescu from the University of Bucharest, who is also going to present a topic on the development of COVID-19 terminology.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Let me briefly introduce myself. I'm an associate professor at the University of Bucharest with the English department, and I mainly teach history of the language, terminology, and translation studies. But I do have a background in formal linguistics as well, since my PhD was on syntax. All right. So starting off, as you have already seen from the program, I'm going to speak about the development of COVID terminology in English and Romanian and the translation challenges that issue from that. This is a very brief walk through my presentation. So we're going to start with some underlying question, talk about the coinage of new words, and then go into the analysis of the terms proper with a view of looking at processes that are involved in lexical change and applied to the language generated during the pandemic, and hopefully by the end we can reach some conclusions. So there are obviously many underlying questions in any research of this type, and probably the most general one is, why do languages change? Obviously, the most straightforward answer would be that languages are living organisms, and as such they undergo various cycles in their evolution over time. And English, starting with the Middle English period, has been very, very hospitable towards new words, neologisms, loanwords, and so on and so forth. Now, as you can see, I have also supplied their definition for the term idiolect, which is the speech habits peculiar to a particular person as per the Oxford Dictionary of the English Language. So basically, this means that a single user applies a word or phrase in a new way, then they disseminate the new word. And this is exactly what happened during the past 2 years with the general pandemic we all went through. A second question would be, how does this impact communication during such extraordinary times? So basically, words and vocabulary, the lexicon changes very quickly, and it is very difficult to keep track of it, especially as far as dictionaries are concerned, as we have seen. We often see new words in the media, and we are aware of that lexical change. English, as I have already said, has constantly underwent lexical changes throughout its history. It both gained and lost nouns, verbs, adjectives over time. And the inclusion of new words in dictionary sometimes gets media attention, and this is what has happened in more recent times, as it were. Now, let us take look at the data. So as you can see, we have some generic terms that we were mostly familiarized with during the pandemic. If you look at the English counterpart and then at the Romanian counterpart, you're going to see that, at least for example, in the case of quarantine, lockdown, or confinement, Romanian uses the same term. So really not that rich as far as adaptation goes. We have also witnessed the coinage of new words, mostly in the media and social media circles. So as you can see, yeah, for COVID-19, we have, yeah, the let's say official term COVID-19 also in Romanian, but also in social media outlets, we have witnessed the surgence of, let's say, folk etymology type of words such as COVID, which might be reference to an old type of medicine vitamin that children in Romania used to get back in the day. By analogy, the medicine name was Cavit, or something such as Covrig, which is quite similar in pronunciation to COVID in English, but which actually means pretzel. So it is obviously a derogatory term. And then, as you can see, obviously the English media has come up with more such newly formed words that do not actually have a correspondent in Romanian. Some of them do, some of them don't. As I was saying, yeah, there are several processes, lexical processes that are involved here, and we're going to take a look at examples to illustrate all these processes of lexical change and how they affected English, and whether we do have correspondence for those in Romanian. Now, as far as compounding is concerned, English as a language is quite innovative, since it managed to put forth examples such as combination of stems or roots from extinct languages such as Greek and Latin. And you have examples to that extent there. But what is more interesting about English is that it has come up with hybrid compounds, yeah, such as television. And this is something that transpires later on in these compounds that surfaced during the pandemic. So you would get terms such as corona coaster, which is obviously derived on the pattern of roller coaster and refers to experiencing conflicting emotions during lockdown. And more specifically, it refers to the repeated highs that is created by spare time and the lows created by the restrictive existence. And then you would have words such as coronapocalypse or coronageddon. On a more humorous side, you would get a corona cut, which is a do-it-yourself type of haircut due to the closure of hairdresser salons and barber shops during lockdown. And you would even get something such as corona dodge, yeah, which is an unnatural and overacted swerve carried out in the belief that it will prevent contracted coronavirus from avoiding individuals. Now, going back to what I was saying about hybrid compounding, we do get that with verbs such as telework and the lexical family of telework, which basically combines native stem with Latin root. Now, for Romanian, if we are to look at teleworking, we do have it. It is actually an instance of borrowing calc or loan translation, whichever way you want to label it. rather than a type of hybrid compounding, because we do have the noun. However, Romanian hasn't actually developed the lexical family, so there is no verb such as to telework as we do have in English. So there is this resistance to conversion, perhaps because we already have verbal phrases that already render this idea of working from home or working from a distance. Some other examples of hybrid compounding, again related to teleworking, can be found in legal texts. So here you have an excerpt from a law that was passed in 2018, so way before the pandemic, which basically shows that these terms actually pre-existed the pandemic. Only they were not that frequently used or known to the public. So in a way, you could say that we are dealing with some sort of revival or more frequent use of already existing terms. So we do have telemuncă, which is telework, and telesalariat, which would be teleemployee. Now, going back to English, in English, again, due to the various articles that appeared in the media and social media as well, they started using the term Fauci ouchie when talking about the vaccine for the COVID-19. And obviously, yeah, the term is quite transparent for interpretation, yeah, since it refers to Dr. Anthony Fauci, Chief Medical Advisor to President Biden. What is interesting about this one is that it is reduplicative. And as such, this is not really what we would call, let's say, formal term. But nevertheless, such terms occur. Romanian does make use of reduplicatives. However, in this particular case, we could not really find something even remotely similar to the English one. Moving on, another lexical process involved in the generation of such terms is misrona, yeah, a clipping. Obviously, this is a clipping from corona, and it was transformed into an eponym. So, yeah, basically a common noun becoming a proper name. And it was used as, again, slang for the coronavirus, and it was not really widely documented in dictionaries. We have found one such context by using onelook.com, and we found in Urban Dictionary some instances of Rona and misrona. However, as we all know, yeah, Urban Dictionary is not really your prototypical type of dictionary that should be really taken as a point of reference. However, in this particular case, it was the only available source of reference for that one. Moving on to conversion, we have witnessed the rise of the verb to hamster in the meaning of hoarding, coming from the Dutch verb hamsteren. And apparently, it gained prominence during the pandemic when a sign language Dutch interpreter used it to refer to the idea of panic buying and hoarding, something that I think everybody witnessed in the early stages of the pandemic. If we are to try some sort of equivalence for the verb to hamster in Romanian, we would have a term similar to that one, but again, it would be quite restricted as far as its use. Moving on to derivation, which is probably more relevant for, let's say, terms that would have an official status. Romanian made use at the beginning of the pandemic of the term isolată, which is basically an isolation pod that was used by emergency services whenever they were called to pick up a patient with coronavirus. Our only, let's say, online source of dictionaries for Romanian, general reference Romanian dictionaries, is Dex Online, which is basically an aggregator of various other Romanian dictionaries. However, there is no, let's say, official or paid team that actually enters these definitions. So it's pretty much more along the lines of Wikipedia in a way. And the person that actually introduced the definition for this particular term that everybody could see on TV and whatnot doesn't actually commit to the etymology of the word, and they state within the definition that the etymology is unknown, but they issue this hypothesis that it is probably a derivation from the verb to isolate plus a suffix that is commonly used in Romanian for words such as bicycle, motorcycle, push scooter, and so on and so forth. So these types of moving transportation devices. In English, however, the isolation pod is a term that came to be used much earlier. It goes as far back as the Ebola virus epidemic in Guinea. Moving on to something that was quite productive during the epidemic, namely blending. We have blends such as covidiot and covedient, which is a blend of COVID and obedient. And this is something that is rendered as such in Romanian as well. Other examples would be COVID divorce, Corona baby, Coronacation, Covexit, Corona-lusion, or Corona-splaining. Again, most of them are taken from the media. Again, Romanian is, let's say, poorer from this point of view. I could only find instances of a COVID divorce that was used in various instances, but not really for the rest of them. Now, as far as acronyms and abbreviations are concerned, there was a debate at one point in time whether we should use COVID with capital letters or COVID just like any acronym. And apparently, the one in capital letters is dominant in the US, Canada, Australia, whereas the acronym COVID is more common in the UK, Ireland, New Zealand, and South Africa. Now, if we are to take a look at Romanian, it was initially borrowed as an acronym, and this is why one Romanian linguist claims that that's the reason behind the capitalization. But we also adopted other acronyms and abbreviations for terms that are related to the coronavirus, and here I can show you, sorry, I can show you a table that actually draws a parallel between abbreviations and acronyms used in English, those that their correspondence in Romanian, and those that were given by Google Translate into Romanian. So for most of them, if you look at what Google Translate did there, you can see that it either basically copied the English acronym or abbreviation, or as it happened in the case of the World Health Organization, yeah, since it is abbreviated as the WHO, it simply translated it as the relative pronoun care in Romanian, which actually means who. Okay, so that's that. There are also some borrowings from other languages into English. For example, you have Coronaspec, which refers to the fact that most people got during the pandemic because of lack of mobility. There is a problem in finding a Romanian equivalent for this particular term. And yeah, I have supplied here some possible equivalents for that. And again, reverting to the verb to hamster from hamster kaufen, that was discussed previously, a hârciogi would be a good possible Romanian equivalent for that, since it is derived from the noun meaning hamster or hog. Yeah, so to hog, that would be a good example of equivalence. And then, of course, there are all sorts of examples of semantic shift. Yeah, for example, things such as sheltering in place or elbow bump, and more recently it was shortened into L bump. And
kind of, the time is
yeah, I do realize. So I'm going to wrap up. Yes. Okay. There are also some examples of contronyms that do have equivalents in Romanian as well. It's just that the first or the second meaning developed at a later stage, but we did develop the second meaning of the English term. Of course, the confusing terms social distancing and physical distancing, and I'm only going to mention the fact that social distancing had 7,000 occurrences on Google search for Romanian, whereas physical distancing only had 61,400 occurrences. Okay, and to round up, obviously new terminology was generated as a consequence of the pandemic. We can actually notice a failure of standard dictionaries to keep up with the new terminology, and there is hesitance in including new terms because they are deemed as being slang. We have seen the revival of older terms, including corona, which is actually a much older term. And of course, there are a lot of challenges in finding Romanian equivalents, since Romanian is not that flexible or hospitable to borrowing or adapting, as we have seen in the case of teleworking for the noun, but there is a lack of corresponding verb for that. And here are some of my references.
All right, thank you very much. And right, I think if anybody has a question, can certainly directly communicate with Daria in the chat box. I think
only one short question. Thank you very much for your interesting lecture. Is there a database of neology, a neology database for Romanian? Thank you.
There is only one, let's say, corpus, online corpus that is available for Romanian, and it is called Corolla, not Corona, but Corolla. It's relatively new, but not all of these terms can be found there. So only those that are, let's say, labeled as official could be found in that particular database. Unfortunately, we are not that developed as far as corpora are concerned, at least electronic corpora are concerned. So this is why we base our research mostly on whatever it is that we find via Google Translate or Bing Translation. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.